name is Donna Heintze Davis, and my father was raised here on Mad Creek Ranch, which is up the hill, right a ways up here. But the Dude Ranch was here. It was owned by a man named Doc Ives. These old cabins were part of the Dude Ranch where the people stayed. There was a lodge across the creek. This is an area where we used to camp when I was a child. 2 weeks at a time, come in and stay here. It was awesome. It still is awesome.
And your dad grew up on the ranch up there.
My grandparents moved up. They moved to Steamboat in 1913.
And their names were?
Robert Heintze and Elizabeth Heintze.
Okay, and how do you spell Heintze?
Heintze.
Okay.
They stayed in Steamboat for 2 years, and he had his Stanley steamer brought over here on the train, he says, and he ran the mail from here to Craig.
Cool.
And then in 1915 they acquired this land.
And started cattle ranching and everything that goes along with that. And we're going to walk up there in just a minute to see some of the remains of that. Right. So then your dad was born there?
He was born in Denver, actually.
Okay.
He was born in 1913. So they moved over here right after he was born. And then I guess they were in Steamboat staying somewhere for a couple of years until they acquired this.
Did he have brothers and sisters?
He did. He had an older sister, Aurelia, and a younger sister, Mary.
And you say you've got pictures of them riding horses from here up and over the red dirt trail to school in Clark, is what he said. And we just acquired his little school book, so maybe we'll be able to get some details of that.
That'd be awesome.
And then, so the trail that we hiked in on from the parking lot is the old road. So even though the hillside has started to erode down into the trail and makes it seem skinny, it actually was a road wide enough to bring a car up here, including that Stanley steamer. Road that you would drive in on when you would visit in the 60s, and that would be the road that was used for your grandparents and your dad to get up here when they weren't on horseback.
Or the other road that goes down the other side.
Okay, great. And then tell us a little bit about what you know about the Mad Creek barn.
I know that it was used as part of the Mad Creek Dude Ranch because my dad and his sister ran the Dude Ranch for 2 or 3 years in the 30s, and he did the horses, and that's where he had the horses, kept them, stabled them, took care of them.
So aside from your dad's family and the Iveses, were there anybody else up here that you know of?
I'm sure there were, but I don't have the names.
Okay, but not anybody that you have really heard about or...
Well, the Mays, because I think they lived down
Yes.
Elk
Their ranch was down there.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And you said you camped up here once for 2 weeks, and the fishing was so great you got 250 trout?
Yes.
Wow. Sounds like some really good memories. What about, do you remember the insides of any of these cabins? What do you remember about these cabins or the ranch, or kind of this operation that we're seeing in these buildings behind you?
Well, the cabins, when we were up here, were actually standing, so they were in little less disrepair.
Yeah, and people stayed in them.
Well, not when we were here.
Okay.
It was just abandoned at that point.
Okay.
There was nothing.
Okay. So when do you think that they actually, people were staying in them? In the 40s and 50s?
You know, since my grandpa left in the 40s, I can't say. I just know my dad and his sister Mary ran the Dude Ranch during the Depression.
Okay.
That's kind of how they made a little extra money.
Okay, so these are some old buildings.
Yeah.
And so they were abandoned but still standing pretty well when you came back in the 60s.
Right.
Okay. Standing here just above the creek where we're thinking that the lodge was, and we'll be able to look at the photos. There's an old stove here, and by the size of it, looks like that would have been maybe in the center of the lodge because you wouldn't be able to move that. And there's a lot of burnt wood and metal along the ground, broken glass, pottery, so possibly it. What do you want to share, anything about the lodge or anything about this spot?
The pictures I think I've already shared with you. There's a lot of pictures of the lodge being used as a hunting rendezvous. Lots of elk and bears even being harvested in this area.
After nearly hiking 4 miles from the Mad Creek Trailhead and up the Forest Service Road towards the Hot Springs Trail, and then a 2-track off of that, we have now gotten to your family's homestead. So tell me again who lived here.
Well, this was the home of Robert Conrad Heintze and his wife Elizabeth Wonderly Heintze.
And they moved here in
1915.
Okay, and they lived here until approximately...
Well, she was killed in the 30s, and he moved out probably in early 40s.
Okay.
1940.
And his 3 children were here.
Yeah.
And they grew up here.
Right.
All that time. So let's see how many years that was. About 30-something years.
Yeah.
And they had a cattle ranch up here. We're not sure exactly how much land they had up here, but we've seen lots of open fields along the way. And then this was bought by the Ives and then eventually the Forest Service. Tell us some of the stories from your grandfather or your dad about growing up in this, first of all, incredibly scenic place, but I can't think of a more remote location. There's Rocky Peak back there. It's just it's a very far away, and obviously the 2-track road is no longer a 2-track road, it's a single-track trail. Well, first of all, this is the house. We have pictures in our collection now from you about the house. And then down the hill, I'll film in a second, is a barn.
There were barns as we were walking up. There were sheds and barns, and then there was a corn crib up here.
Is that where Katie is right now?
Up in that area. And then there was a shed right in front of us over there.
Right over here, there was a shed. Okay, and we have pictures of those. What else can you share with us about stories that your grandfather or dad talked about growing up here?
Well, of course, there's a lot of snow. And in order to feed the cows and what have you, everything was done on a sled. I know that they built if you see right back here, this thing here was actually like a tunnel that went to the door, so that you could actually get out of the house in the wintertime without the snow getting in your way.
And the snow would take you to...
Well, it was a long... See, that's the door. So it came out this way, and this was just a little entryway or crazy thing.
And so when you would come up here in the 60s, this house was intact?
Yeah, it was.
So this has all been in the last 50 years or so?
Yeah, each year I come up here, it's a little worse.
It's what does it mean to you to come up here and see this again after so many years?
It just kind of feels like home in a way. A little bit of something is there, you know. They all had a hard life up here. Very difficult. But I think they had a good life.
Although you said the girls didn't like it. So the girls, their names were?
Well, my dad was the middle child. He had a younger sister, Mary, and an older sister, Aurelia. And Aurelia, like I said, she did teach school above Hayden for a while, and then she did meet her husband and moved away. They went to Empire, and the younger girl went to work at the Navy Department in Washington, D.C. during the war, married.
But they grew up here until it was time to do that.
Right.
So what else did they say about being up here? I mean, that's a long time in this remote location. I mean, it's not anywhere near anything.
I know. Well, there was one story that my grandpa told me. They had 20 milk cows because they sold milk and butter and all that to people.
So they took that down.
Elk River, yeah. And one evening he was up here alone. The rest of the family was gone for some reason. He had to milk those cows. But he was chopping wood and chopped right down through his thumb here and had to milk cows. So the only thing he could do was dip his hand in a barrel of turpentine, wrap it up with rags, and milk the cows, and then go to the doctor the next day, which would entail a horseback ride or a wagon ride down to Steamboat.
Turpentine. That doesn't sound very comfortable.
No.
Oh my gosh. So obviously they did okay because the kids ate.
Right. Exactly.
And the wife died in the 30s. Do you mind sharing how she was killed?
Yeah. My grandpa wrote a little story that she had to go tend to some legal business in Broomfield.
Mm-hmm.
She apparently was a part of an estate. She had to deal with the estate. So he took her out of here on a wagon. He said it was like 40 below or something. You know, it gets cold here. Took her to the railroad station, and then he said that was the last time he'd seen her alive. She took the train over to Denver, and then she took a bus out to Broomfield to meet the people that they were supposed to meet, the Metzes. And as she was walking around the bus, a taxi cab went by and hit her and killed her. So she never came back. And I think that was in 36. I'm not sure. I'd have to check the dates.
So how old was your dad when he lost his mom?
I think it was like 18, somewhere 17, 18.
So at least they were pretty grown.
Yeah, except
But
Mary.
still, yeah, but
it's
still it's not easy at all. And so he continued on another 10, 15 years even after she died. Wow, that's a strong father. And then the kids were grown, so he continued on by himself here.
You're right.
That had to be a lonely.
And I think that's when he said, I can't do this.
And then he went and moved in with your dad in Georgetown.
Right.
Okay. So it looks like the building here is made of wood siding, but then I see back here is kind of a log structure over here in the back. Is that still part of the house? Just maybe an addition?
I think it was. I would guess it was the kitchen, but I don't know. If we walk around the other side, you can. I don't even know where they would.
Yeah, where would they get a log that size? And then you can see the rock foundation there too. Another view from the back. Shed here. There's the house. There's Sleeping Giant. And then you think this is the corn crib here? Or another just outbuilding?
I don't know.
Threshing machine in situ. Wow. Definitely weren't going to move that out of here. Here's a pot.
So, was that the outhouse right over? No.
Okay, well, I think the front part was a living room, and then there was a little porch.
Mm-hmm.
And then as it moved back, I think there were bedrooms. I'm pretty sure the kitchen was an add-on, like they always were, on the back of the house.
And so they probably ate eggs, milk, chicken, bear meat.
Whatever wandered by, I think would be lunch.
Mm-hmm.
Because they did have a lot of bear. I know he talked about eating bear.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk more about things that you remember your grandfather or your dad telling you about living up here. So you tell us the story of the barbed wire fence and the horse rooster.
Oh, well, that was a story that my dad had, because he had a horse named Rooster that was not rideable for most people, but for some reason they let my dad ride him. And he was coming up where we just walked up. He said it was late afternoon, getting dusky, and he decided to just let the horse run. And they ran through a barbed wire fence gate that someone had put up in the dark, and they didn't see it. So they hit the fence, and they both rolled around, and they both kind of got up on the other side and shook and realized they were just fine. So they came on home.
What about anything else that kind of stands out in your mind as being like, oh my gosh, they lived like that for 30 years?
Yeah. Well, I think just the daily routine of no electricity, outside toilets, water. I think they did have a spring here somewhere that did supply them water.
That's nice.
But
Were they close family?
yeah, I think they were.
Did they talk about coming to Steamboat or to Clark very often? You said probably daily for school.
Yeah, well, that's what my dad said. He went to Clark to school over red dirt. I have a picture of him and his sister on a horse that they rode, little white horse. It's a little overwhelming, I think, for me to even imagine trying to live up here.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
they did it for a long time.
Wow.
I'm sure they did a lot of canning.
Yeah, because even though we talk about that when we did the homesteading exhibit, that, pioneers feels like it's, late 1800s, but in areas like this, coming in and settling an area like this remote in 1918 and living the way they did was fully the pioneer homesteading lifestyle.
Yeah, I totally agree. And they never had a car, so they never drove up here themselves. They just had horses and wagons.
Mm-hmm. Wow,
But
all the way through the 40s.
Yeah, but other people would come up here with cars, because I've got pictures of the house and big cars sitting out here.
Cars next to it, yeah.
Yeah, that back to the grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
when she passed, they didn't have a phone, they didn't have anything up here, so whoever, the Metzes, I suppose the people that lived in Broomfield that she went to see, called the Mays down in Elk River, and they sent a man, I don't know who, Mr. May,
Fred.
Mr. May.
came up here, walked up here with a lantern to deliver the news.
And what's so ironic about that is they were surviving and continued to survive up here such harsh elements, and her one quick trip to the city is what killed her. It's just
Yeah.
so ironic.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
Right?
And then I can't even imagine because he probably, even though he chose this, you make those decisions based on a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot imagine what he must have felt like having to raise these children and their heartache and his own heartache, and then have to get up every day. It reminds me, actually, Katie, of Shepherdess of the Elk River Valley a little bit, as part of having to take care of animals and having to take care of kids was the thing that got him through the grief, perhaps,
Very well
because you didn't have time to sit around and feel sad.
Yeah.
And there were living beings that needed you every day, and a ranch that needed to keep going, and you had to do that regardless of how you felt. Well, I just can't imagine this heartbreaking story. Anything else you want to share while we're on, and then we
Well,
should probably head down the hill.
Pet bear.
Pet
They
bear.
had a pet bear on a cable out here.
That's right.
Oh my.
Got
There's
pictures.
pictures. And then they sold it to Eliges.
Well, not that one.
That's a
That one actually killed a pig that they had, and my grandfather shot the bear. But my dad he was catching bears, and he would take the cubs and send them to Eliges, because they had a bear pit in Denver.
That was part of their
This side business. Yeah.
attractions.
Yeah. So they had a pet bear to just
Just to
keep
have,
on a chain.
just because.
Well, and the Crawfords talk about that too. They had a pet sandhill crane, and I think a baby mountain lion.
Oh,
Yeah, Marjorie had a bear for a little while. I think if you got him as a cub,
Yeah.
it was possible.